Ahoj, moje jméno je Petr Holík a tohle je Nenásilný podcast s Petrem a Petrem. Dneska teda jenom s jedním Petrem, protože tahleta epizoda je něčím speciální, není to jedna z těch našich obvyklých, ale dnes je to speciál, protože tu mám hnedka dva hosty. Jedním z nich je Otec Chris, což je trenér nenásilné komunikace a zároveň jezuitský kněz, který žije a působí na Srí Lance. A s ním dnes povede rozhovor Ondráš Přibyla, což je náš dobrý kamarád, učitel a trenér nenásilné komunikace tady z Brna. Takže vzhledem k tomu, že jsme dneska mezinárodní, tak já už za chviličku přepnu do angličtiny a tenhle ten rozhovor se povede hlavně v angličtině. Pokud pro vás angličtina nefunguje a anglicky mluvit neumíte, tak nám určitě napište. My zkusíme víc tak udělat nějaký přepis do nějakého více srozumitelného jazyka nám Čechům. Není problém, pokud o to bude zájem, tak určitě tohle to můžeme udělat. So, gentlemen, I would like to officially welcome you to our podcast. Our guests today, Father Chris and Ondráš Přibylou. As I see it, this podcast will be mainly conversation of you two, and if I have some input from time to time, I may say something, but I would like to leave the most of the space to you. If you want to introduce yourself some more, I just basically said your names. We can start with that, or if you just want to jump into some interesting topic, you can do that too.
I think I would like to jump into interesting topic, which is introducing you, but you can do it more yourself. I understood that you were born on Sri Lanka. That's correct, yes. Some 76 years ago. And then you somehow became a Jesuit priest, and then you met Marshall Rosenberg and started doing NVC. And how did it all blend it together? Was it seamless? Was it like you are just doing the same thing all your life, or was there some kind of change when you met nonviolent communication? Did it fit?
Well, I'm beginning to realize the flow of it now. I was not aware of it at the time, and there were worries and struggles and all that was there. But now I see from a different perspective, there has been a flow all along. And so I think it is right from the time I decided to become a Jesuit, it was very clear that so let me start with giving a little introduction of how I joined the Jesuits. And that is when I had this idea for a long time that I want to do something different. In other words, I just don't want to just marry and have a family and struggle with life all along, but I thought I would do something else. And what impressed me was the missionary priests who were working in the school where I was studying. And they had a tremendous source of energy. They were able to, their smile, the way that they welcomed you and talked to you and all that, there was something different about them. So I wanted to also find a different path. And since my eldest brother was already a Jesuit priest, I thought maybe I'll become myself one. But it implied that I leave the place when I was just about 16 or 17 and go to India for I don't know how many years, and I cannot come back, and it's not an easy path to take. So that was what was really sort of the difficulty for me, to leave home, to go to another country and stay out there for a long time without any connection with my brothers, sisters, and my parents. That was difficult. So I was just thinking what to do and whether actually is this a call, or is this an invitation for me to follow, And at that time, of course, I talked to some of the people and that I knew in the school, and they said, well, if you have a vocation, that's what they call, if you have a call, then you You just follow it. And so I was not, they say, you know, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, you know. So that is, I said, okay, anyway, you have to first pass your first exam in the school before you can join. And so when I went to get the results from my exam, I just stopped in the way in a church and prayed, well, if I really have a vocation, if I really have to follow this path, let me first pass this exam. After that, I went to the school, and to find out I was the only one who passed in the whole school.
Oh.
That was, for me, was a complete surprise. Not that I was very bright or anything, but it is just the others, not that they all failed, but they were referred in one subject or the other, you know. But I was the only one who cleared all the subjects and passed. So that was, for me, it was a clear sign that, you know, this is where I need to go. So I went along, and the decision was actually, so that's why normally I say, why did you choose? And I say there was no choice there. So then I continued, and it was not easy, it was difficult, because so far away from home, I was feeling terribly lonely, and at one point I thought, well, I'd better go back home. But one day I just walked out of the novitiate where I was staying and just walked the whole day, and then came back to the place and thinking of talking and leaving. But then somehow just the walking sort of took care of my struggle, and it went away, and I stayed on. So there were many moments of difficulties and things, but I stayed on. So I just went. Of course, the Jesuit life takes a long time. It's about 14 years of studies, but it was fun-filled years, you know. It was very meeting so many young people from different parts of the world and different countries, you know. So it was very, 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 very exciting. On top of it, they sent me to Italy and all these places. So another time was when I finished my philosophy studies in Italy. I put myself on the road to go to do a pilgrimage to Lourdes.
Okay.
And then I went with a friend of mine. Both of us started from Gallarate, and then we went up to France, I think. France, Lyon or somewhere. And then my friend said, it is too much for me. He's too tired. So he just took the train and went back. And I continued. Went to Paris because I didn't have much money. So I just stopped at the Jesuit houses. So on the way also, for instance, I was caught in one place. There was a hailstorm, and I was all alone in a farm place. There was no ride. And then I opened the first house that was there, opened the door, and there was a old lady who came and looked at me and went back, ran and came back with a towel, you see, and gave me to wipe. And then afterwards I stayed with that family, French family. I didn't know much French, but she was there with her two grandkids, and I stayed the night with them. And then the next day that she prepared a lunch packet and gave it to me so that I could try another ride there. And that was very impressive. And then I went all the way to Paris. I got to Paris and found out where the Jesuits were at Rue de Grenelle. And then I went and to the Jesuit house, and I said, could I stay for a couple of days? I'm on my way to Lourdes. And they said, we are sorry, we don't know who you are. You did not write to us, inform us. So, sorry, we have no place. So I was just standing there, just saying a little prayer, just standing there at the gate for some time, maybe for about half an hour I was there, I think. And then suddenly, through the gate comes my brother. who is a Jesuit, who had been in US. He was studying and he finished his studies. He was on his way back home. So he had booked the place, stayed there. So when he saw me, he was so happy, and then he introduced me to the place.
Okay.
And I got in. So like that, there were many small incidents, which...
And it seems, and it's for me the first time I'm hearing you talking about small things as a science. And it now it's very clear. But yes. So there are signs on your way.
All along. And you could see it in the sense of, I began to be a little more observant of these things and was able to see a whole lot of time that this happens,
Okay, so this is what you refer to when you speak about flow of life?
Flow of life. So then I said, look, if I could just allow these things to go on its own instead of myself trying to make the choices and take the decisions and all that, you see. And the life guides you through and through. So that is what, and so I began to live sort of choiceless in that sense, in the sense not allowing life to take me where it will. So that was a big learning and experience for me.
How did you came to the nonviolent communication?
Nonviolent communication is because I was working with a friend of mine who was a priest in Sri Lanka, and he was trying to get young people who were arrested, who by the army, and he would go and argue with them and try to get them released. And the army didn't like that very much, and because there was real violent war going on there. And so very often a bomb goes and then the army gets all upset and they start shooting around and burning houses. So I would go with my camera and take photographs, and then we send them out and get some money and try to rebuild the houses. And this priest, when I was there one day and I heard a big gunshot. So I looked around and then came to the church, and the children were playing, and there were two young boys who came and they got on their bicycle and were running away. And then I asked the children, what happened? Did you hear the noise? We don't know what noise. So then I went to see my friend's house, the rectory, and then opened the door. And there he was in a pool of blood, and he was killed by these young hired people, young fellows who killed him and have gone. So at that time I said, well, I was a little afraid because next might be my turn. So then I said, well, I cannot just go leaving the work that I was doing, because I was in charge of a big retreat house. And so I was seeing what can I do. And then at that time, just a couple of days after that, the army that was camped around the retreat house, their captain came and said, Father, we are sorry, we have to take this building because we need this for our operation. So I said, well, I will ask my superiors. So I called my superiors and asked. They said, well, I don't think we can do anything because the government is in this war and we can't do anything. So I had to leave the job and get out of the house. So then, of course, I was free. Then I asked my superior, is it okay if I go out and do some studies or something? And they allowed me to come out. So I came to the States. And I was continuing my studies in communication at Ohio State University. And I was prolonging my time at the university because I don't know, because the war was getting bad, and I was wondering whether...
So you were kind of hiding at the university.
Yeah, that is correct, yeah. So then anyway, and the other thing I was thinking of is even if I were to go back, what am I going to take back from here, Though I was doing good, interesting work with Freire, Brazil, who I was just doing research on him and his work. And then one day, an old friend of mine that I knew some years back, and she came and told me, I say, you are studying communication, and I'm working for a man who is also doing communication. Would you like to meet him? I said, yes, of course. And then she introduced me to Marshall Rosenberg. And I went for the first workshop, and immediately it struck me, this is something that I can take back.
Oh, okay.
That was enough for me. So then I soon finished writing my research, finishing my thesis, everything, and I was ready to go. And Marshall offered me IIT training that I was able to do in Denmark. And during that time, I asked Marshall, would you be willing to come to Sri Lanka, to start this work so that we can introduce this to Sri Lankans who are having war. And he said, Chris, as soon as I get the money, I will be willing to come. And that is beautiful about Marshall, but he was always ready to go wherever it takes, And so in the, what they call the giraffe around the world, they have a time in this program where Marshall talks about the different NVC works that's going on all around the world. So he was talking about it, and then he mentioned that Chris has invited me to come to Sri Lanka, and as soon as I get the money, I will go. And one of the participants right away there wrote a check for $8,000.
So he covered all the expenses.
Yeah, so Marshall was ready to come, So when I came to Sri Lanka, I organized everything, and I invited Marshall, and everything was ready. And then I came to Colombo to pick up Marshall from the airport and take him. And then when I was in Colombo, suddenly there was a bomb blast. The most sacred Buddhist temple in Sri Lanka, where the Buddha's tooth was kept, and was damaged, with this bomb, and everything came to a standstill. So I was really frustrated because I also could not go back because there was no trains, nothing running. So I was in Colombo, and suddenly someone called and said, "Are you Chris Rajendram?" I said, "Yes." Do you know anything about nonviolent communication? I said, I know something. And they said, would you be willing to come and share for half an hour or so something about it? Because we have a workshop going on. So I said, sure. And I went there, a place in Colombo. And then during the workshop, I shared what I knew. And then afterwards, they told me to stay on for the 3 days that they were having the workshop, and to ask questions and share more and more. So that was the beginning of NVC. So after that, Marshall, when everything settled, Marshall came to Sri Lanka and started NVC. And I just kept organizing these workshops.
It is the first time I'm hearing the story with all the bomb blasts in it. That's something I didn't realize. I knew that there was a war in Sri Lanka, but now I'm hearing there was really a war, and you were part of all this, what was happening around it. You spoke about nonviolent communication as something you brought back, and it feels almost like a tool. And yesterday when we were at the workshop, it sounded that NVC, nonviolent communication, is for you not a tool, but a spiritual path. So did this nonviolent communication spiritual path and Jesuit spiritual path, did they collide in some way, or was it just seamless transition from, or were Jesuits afraid that they are losing you because you are doing nonviolent communication, or how was it?
Yeah, at one point, because as soon as I came back, I was hired to teach at the university. I said, I don't want to be lost in this university where there's a lot of thinking going on. And so I said, I want to be in touch with the pain of the people around the place. So I gathered about 20 kids who had lost their parents in this war and lived with them. And I said, this is the beautiful thing that I could share with these kids. And of course, children, there is no point teaching the children. And I said the only option was to model the process. So this sort of taught me to live NVC. So instead of teaching, and which is then I realized also that the children got what I was trying to say to them, because I thought this will somehow break the cycle of violence. It's not so. And the children also began to, and they grasp easily. Children have no resistance to these things because they already have this language so close to them. So, and I could receive their feedback in the sense of how they lived and what they were. One day after this kid, one of the kids had finished his studies and he was working in a shop or something. And then he came and asked me, Father, there is a young, beautiful lady in the bazaar there, and the people are taking advantage of her. Could you do something to help her, because she's not all there in her mind. She's a little crazy. So I said, I was touched by that, that this young boy was be sensitive to the pain of the and the suffering. So that way there were many places I began to see that they have received the message that I was trying to give it to them through living it. And also it's helped me very mostly to live NVC. That's why I always keep saying that don't practice but live the process. So this bomb blast in the temple, for instance, gave me the understanding, whatever that might come, this NVC has its own energy. It's part of the life energy that I'll talk about. And it will take its own turn and it will go its own way. And there is no need for me to do much to spread NVC. It will go on its own. So that's also came slowly. These understandings came to me. And of course, I saw the difficulty with my Jesuit colleagues, because I was doing this work with the children, and my focus, of course, is more of giving this life skill to the children. But therefore, they were worried because the children were not becoming the first in class and topping and all that, because they wanted, as the Jesuit motto is, the very best. You see, they say ad maiorem Dei gloriam, means for the greater glory of God. Whatever you do the top. So they were not too happy, and so I realized that there is a lot of resistance from them. But then slowly I thought I will be able to get them to understand it. And then I began to see the teachings of St. Ignatius, and they are all embedded. I mean, NVC, they are all in NVC, if you look at it. It's all there. For instance, St. Ignatius one says he gives 1 month of exercises, spiritual exercises. At the end, he says he gives you one way of prayer. He calls it contemplation to obtain love, which means basically you look what is their observation, and see how the presence of God in everything that you see. So that's what he calls the contemplation to obtain love. So that is the first step in NVC, the observation. So for me, it translates into that. Everything that I was doing began to be translated into the practice of NVC, but it was very close to it. And so slowly I saw all these things. And then the other teachings, for instance, his big teaching on discernment of spirits, we call it. That is, because most of the people do these retreats to be able to come to make life decisions. So for this, they use these teachings about how to discern the spirits.
By discern, you mean some kind of distinguishing, like seeing clearly what is the thing or the decision they want to make.
Yeah, more than the decision, how you are moved. You see, we are all moved in different directions, and one day you say that I should do this, and second day it might say, no, this might be not the right time. So this is who is moving the spirit inside,
Okay.
So how does this spirit inside moves you? So that is the discernment of spirits. And also some basic rules come out of it. Of course, it's common sense now, in the sense of when you are in when you are in consolation or in desolation, you don't take decisions.
Okay.
Because you're in a different place. So
it's like wait till the morning.
Yes, wait till these things. When you are in consolation, you rather think about what you will do when you are in desolation. Right?
Yeah.
So that way, it sort of gives a very simple, practical thing, which all came from, of course, St. Ignatius' own observation of his time of recovery from his injuries.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense that when you speak about it this way, that it's actually the process of nonviolent communication, like observing outside, observing inside, seeing what is moving inside of you, seeing the motivation, and then acting. That kind of makes sense. Does it also, does the nonviolent communication change your perception of some Christian concepts?
Very much.
Christian talk about Christ, God. There is this communion thing where they take wine and bread. Did the nonviolent communication change how you see this?
Yeah, because for me it was so clearly written in the Gospels. For instance, it says, "Be compassionate as your heavenly Father is compassionate." That's that's sort of the summary of the commandment, like we call it commandment. But that is basically what NVC is. NVC is not about improving your skills. It is about cultivating a compassionate heart. That is what NVC is for me. And this compassion that they're talking about there is no limit for it. It's be compassionate as your heavenly Father is compassionate, which is, of course, heavenly Father, God, everything. For me, also I realize it translates into life. You see, manifestation of God is life. Your life is actually...
So you don't take God as something other?
No, because first of all, we don't know God. Anyway, no one knows Him. So at least if you can feel Him, if you can touch Him, and if you can experience Him, it is only the movement of life. So for me, life is God. And of course, we are talking about language. Language is really sometimes could be an obstacle. And so you use it it'll be wonderful if you don't have the language, because then I think people in the beginning, that's why they had a very good sense of God in everything they saw, So they were worshipping the trees, this one and all that, because they saw God's presence in all of this. So we, of course, have lost that sense of presence to nature and all these things. So, and we sometimes reading these scriptures think that God is an old man with a big beard, you see. So that sort of sometimes obstructs us, because not everyone, that's a human figure. And so I began to see all of this, how everything really is connected, And so when Ignatius talks about coming to this equanimity of, the spirits of your movements, of your life, and I began to see that when you have this non-attachment to anything, then you begin to come to that level. then the life can move as it wants, you see. So you don't have to take really. So in other words, what he was trying to do, which is not said, is to come to a place of choicelessness, where you can allow life to manifest itself totally. And I began to observe myself how there was more resistance in me and in the people than actually allowing life to manifest itself, So that is my focus also in the sense of in living NVC, is to be able to allow life to manifest itself.
Yeah. Now, as you were talking, we are coming to something I really like about you. That you are speaking about NVC in Christian terms, then you are speaking about Christianity in Buddhist terms, and then you are speaking about Buddhism in nonviolent terms. And it all blends in there. So you spoke about non-attachment. Yesterday at the workshop you spoke about presence. You said NVC for me is just being present. And now it blends nicely. I think this is a place for a cut.
Okay, gentlemen. So thank you for this conversation so far. I'm going to say a few words in Czech for our listeners and then we can decide if you want to continue this dialogue. Takže přátelé, tohle byla první část rozhovoru Ondráše Přibylou a Otce Chrise. Já jsem moc rád, že jsem tu celou dobu, i když jste mě možná neslyšeli, ale je to protože napjatě poslouchám. Pravděpodobně se nám bude chtít pokračovat, takže určitě počkejte na další epizodu a my přidáme ještě nějaký kousek tohoto konverzace. Teď si dáme chviličku pauzu, dáme si možná kávu, protože tady sedíme v jedno krásné deštivé brněnské dopoledne a vy se tam můžete těšit. Určitě budeme v tomhletom rozhovoru pokračovat dalšími zajímavými otázkami na Otce Chrise a těšte se na další epizodu. Tak zatím ahoj.